I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to the Sweetwater Minute. This time out, our special guest, Ned Steinberger from NS Designs. Ned, thank you for coming in.
Hey, my pleasure.
We're glad to have you here.
It's a fabulous place.
Thank you.
Really enjoying it.
Thank you. We were here this morning for the meeting with the sales engineers, and you were showing off these incredible instruments that we have gathered around us here.
Well, I wasn't really showing them off, but Michael and Charles, musicians that we work with, definitely did the showing off.
Absolutely, and they'll be doing a workshop with you tonight, a clinic for the public where you'll be going through some instruments.
And they're very exciting to listen to, so I'm sure we'll have a lot of fun with it.
Right. So how did you get started in this whole business of making instruments? Where did that come from?
Well, it started back in the mid-'70s in Brooklyn, New York. I was working as a cabinet maker and also working as a furniture designer, primarily seating. And I ended up in this cooperative workshop, woodworking shop, where I was there in order to reduce overhead so I could do my design work, which is really what I wanted to do. Cabinet making was a way to survive. And one of the guys in this woodworking co-op was Stuart Spector. And Stuart was making guitars, but the demand that he was, the dealers were telling Stuart that really, for the style of instrument he was making, that basses would do better, because, you know, guitar players tend to play a Fender or a Gibson. They're not so much interested in something different. But bass players are, have a different mindset. So I thought to myself, as a furniture designer, particularly as a chair designer, interested in ergonomics, the way the body and the design fit together, that, well, what would be more exciting than designing a bass guitar? So I said, Stuart, maybe we could get together on this, and I'd like to give it a try. No commitments, just help me a little bit for those areas where I don't know enough, because at the time I knew nothing really about electric instruments or instrument making. So that's how I got started. And I've designed the NS bass, the NS Spector bass that Stuart still makes. And the fun thing about the music business is that, the musical instrument business, is that designs that are accepted it's not like a car where you have a new model every few years. Once, you can't imagine going to your dealer and coming away with a 1947 Chevy, but when you go and buy a Strat guitar, that's basically what you're doing, is buying a design that's tried and true and isn't changed really for decades. So Stuart still has good business with that instrument. And what happened in the process, and actually what I did with that bass, because I was noticing that the neck, I was getting that neck dive, okay? And as someone really focused on the ergonomic aspect, because at the time I took all the sonic aspect, I just took that direct from what technology was available, what Stuart was familiar with, and we incorporated that into the design that was all about getting the instrument to feel and look in a way that would be exciting for players. But I got that neck dive, so I ended up putting a weight in the very far end of the body just to try to mitigate that. And then I remember really looking down at the instrument, looking at that end and that end, and why don't I move the tuners to the body? And of course, that's really what drew me into the instrument business, because and I did experiments with that and proved to myself that it really worked, and it was just very compelling to be able to address that fundamental issue of balance, which is so important for a player, because you're out there all night. You want to be comfortable. You don't want anything to impede your ability to perform and to express yourself and to enrich your audience. You don't want to be dealing with a backache or a shoulder problem. So it seemed very fundamental to me. And then I developed the Steinberger bass over the next couple of years. With some, actually the first one I made, I had some some really crazy ideas about how to make a better sound, and the first instrument I made was a complete disaster. I threw it in the corner, and I thought I was never going to touch it again. But again, the benefit of headless is really compelling, and I went back into it, and that's when I understood about the structure and about sustain and how to get the kind of sonic response I was looking for, and that's what evolved into the carbon fiber, the use of carbon fiber in the design.
Mm-hmm. Right. It was really revolutionary at the time, the headless design and the carbon fiber and the way you were approaching the whole thing.
Well, it was pretty far out there, and I remember bringing this, and again, that whole project originated as a non-commercial experiment, you know, as an exploration, just for the sake of it, you know.
Right.
But, you know, the more work I put into it, the more excited I got about it, the more I wanted to see about the possibility of making a business out of it. Brought that to dealers, you know, people who were in the musical instrument business, and was really, you know, forget it. Nobody wants a radical instrument like that.
Right.
We've seen them before, they come and go. Nobody wants a weird instrument. But I think what they were missing, and the reason that we were able to succeed with it, is that we weren't making a weird instrument. We were making an instrument that a serious musician could look at and go, oh, I get it. It's not about playing around with some weird shape or something. It's about making an instrument that performs in a new and important way. I mean, it doesn't necessarily replace what comes before it, but it's a meaningful alternative, something of real value. And I think musicians could see that. I could see the gleam in their eye, you know, that not everyone, but every other one maybe, you know, would go, yeah. And so that's, you know, that just snowballed, and we got into making them.
Right, had to be fun.
It was fun. It was fun up until the point where I actually went into business, and I had no experience. You see, I made every conceivable mistake you could make. I was so naive, you know. We had $36,000 that we were going to, you know, start this business with, which was gone in a matter of weeks. That's just one among many of the issues that we had. And then eventually I had a little factory. We had some 30 or so employees, and but still, and we were internationally known. I mean, we were doing very well on the one hand in terms of getting our brand recognition and getting people excited about playing the instrument. MTV was very important for us. It's fun to see how that's evolved now, and video is a whole nother kind of thing. But back then it was new and very exciting, and we were getting a lot of coverage on MTV. So we had a lot of success, but running a business and dealing with the banks and all that other kind of thing wasn't my forte. So that's why I sold the business actually to Gibson, and just to get back to my roots, which are design, not being a businessman. Right. I mean, I thought business was going to be straightforward and kind of, I don't know, I had no idea how much creative energy goes into making a good business. So it was very educational for me.
Absolutely. So are you a musician yourself? Do you have a musical background?
Not at all.
Yeah?
I have, when I was, I think it was in 4th grade, I had the opportunity to learn an instrument, and I was brought up in a household where classical music was what we listened to, and I enjoyed it a lot. And I loved the violin, and I wanted to play the violin, and maybe now it would be done differently, and perhaps, the story is that I went in, I said I wanted to play the violin, and they did a little audition with me, and they said, well, maybe you'd rather play the clarinet.
Right.
The reason being that, in their opinion, and it's certainly proven to be true as far as I can tell, you know, I just didn't have the ability to hear pitch and in a way that you really need to be able to play a violin. It's one of the most demanding instruments you can imagine. So, but I played the flute for a while when I was in elementary school, but I just don't have musical talent. That's it. I have other talents, but
Sure.
I'm not a musician.
Right. So what you've been doing lately as you've gotten... Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but
No, it's right.
the other point on that I think is interesting is that while not being a musician is clearly a liability in many ways for the work I do, since I'm involved with musical instruments, on the other hand, it's also, I think, proven to be quite a good thing, because whereas I think a lot of the people who are involved in musical instrument design, for example, are really musicians first, and that the design is something that kind of reinforces their ultimate love and focus. For me, I'm 100% about the design of these instruments. I don't have any conflict or any fantasy that I'm going to be a rock and roll star or anything like that. This is what I do 100%, and I think it's really worked out well for that reason.
Yeah, I can see where you can be more objective about looking at the design.
And more open-minded, because you know, you learn to play Fender Strat, let's say, and you've been playing that, you know, since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. You get attached to it. That's what it's supposed to be.
Right.
Whereas I remember when I first, looked at some of these instruments, I wonder why they were done that way, and how could they be done better? So I think I'm more open-minded, I think, as a result.
Right. And with NS Designs, you're working more with the orchestral instruments. You have the bass as well that you're working with, but we have the upright bass and violin. Do you find that classical musicians are more accepting of the designs that you're doing? Because sometimes it's interesting to me that you'd think the rock musicians were the most progressive and things, but a lot of times they're the most conservative, as you were saying, about their instruments.
Well, I think really all kinds of musicians are conservative, more so than you would think, in terms of their instrument. You take... I
guess that was my question, is do you find the musicians are really conservative?
I would say that classical musicians certainly are not any more accepting of change than anyone else, but you take jazz musicians, for example. I mean, these are very avant-garde players, very forward-looking. They, still tend to be very conservative with their instruments. So it's certainly the biggest challenge that I face personally in terms of getting these instruments accepted and for the business as well. But on the other hand, there is interest in innovation. Despite the conservative nature, it's not a one-dimensional situation, and there is a strong interest in things that are new and exciting. And getting back to what I was saying earlier, if we can deliver tangible benefits, that's the way to get them across, to get things across, so that people can understand why you're doing what you're doing and the benefit that they receive by using the instrument. So, but it's a process, and there's a lot of it's just a conservative marketplace. With violins, actually, it's changing dramatically. When I first got into making violins about 15 years ago, there was virtually no interest in electric violins in the marketplace. I mean, I got to wondering, why am I doing this? Nobody wants this stuff. They want to play what they're used to. But it's really turned around 100%. If I go into any violin shop and start talking to them about electric instruments, whereas 10 years ago they'd be going, we're kind of busy. It's really, tell me more. I need to know more. I realized that this is important for me as a dealer to understand about electric instruments and to offer them to my customers. It's a challenge for them because they don't know anything about it. They don't know one end from an amp from the other, So they got to start from scratch, but they're ready and willing because they need to.
Right.
Because that's where, I don't mean that acoustic instruments these instruments live together, so it's not in any way to denigrate acoustics, but rather just that this electric alternative is exciting for people, and it's a very much of a growing market area.
Right, absolutely. So let's talk about these instruments a little bit. We have the violin here, Tell us a little bit about what differentiates this. What makes this a unique design? What have you applied to this?
Well, if I may, first of all, these frets on the instrument we happen to have here are very unusual. We do offer fretted violins and cellos and violas and so on, because we want to offer instruments that cover as much territory as possible. And of course, a lot of people who might be interested in playing a violin are really, I was talking about when I was younger, being interested in the violin, and the fact that my lack of pitch differentiation would make it very difficult for me to play. So, but that's where frets come in, of course. So this instrument is much more accessible to people who are not violinists first, but maybe are guitar players and otherwise want to have that bowed violin sound. So,
right.
But taking that aside, I'd say the most obvious difference, and a very, very important difference between this violin and a conventional instrument, is that the tuner is located on the body. And that is not done for fun or to look different. It's done because I knew when I was developing this violin, I wanted to make it a modern instrument. Friction tuning pegs, of course, which a conventional violin uses, are really from the Stone Age. I mean, it's a very basic and crude technology, really. I mean, again, these acoustic violins that come to us from that tradition are absolutely fabulous instruments,
Sure.
but the tuners are crude as hell, okay?
Right.
So I wanted to have a precision tuner. And to make a precision tuner, you need metal parts. So putting tuners out on the end of the neck of the violin that have metal parts would add to the weight at the head of the instrument, which is exactly the opposite of what you want to do. You want to reduce the weight here. So after experimenting around with different options for tuners at the head end of the instrument, I realized that there's really only one right way to do it in my mind, and that was to move the tuner to the body. I was concerned about doing that because I know that, we talked about the fact that musicians tend to be conservative as far as their instruments, and they're certainly, violinists are more tradition-bound than probably anyone out there. So it's very conservative. I knew moving that tuner back here was going to be rough for them. Mm-hmm. But I also knew I couldn't deliver the performance that I wanted to unless I did. So that's why the tuner is here. And of course, this tuner is a very significant part of the product because it just works a lot better than a friction tuner. In terms of the stability and accuracy of tuning, it's a precision tuner. Mm-hmm. And it's also a self-clamping tuner. It's a patented design that allows the string to, you just put the string into the tuner and tune it up. These are conventional violin strings. There's no winding around a capstan, winding around a peg head, or a peg, excuse me. You just put the string into the tuner and tune it up. That's all there is to it. So that's an important feature. And it has things that come from my experience in the guitar world. For example, most violins, even electric violins, the bridge is not adjustable. And it's all set at the factory. If you want to change the action height, you can't do it unless you go to a luthier. Mm-hmm. But here we have a couple of screws right in the back that adjust the height of the bridge so that you can adjust it to taste. Of course, the electronics are a very important part of the instrument. This is our own polar pickup system. We call it a polar pickup system because we're able to change the response characteristics of the instrument with this switch. The strings actually the vibration of the string is polarized in relation to the fingerboard, especially when you use the bow. So if you want to get a great bowed sound, you need lateral vibration, which is, of course, when the bow is going across the string, it's driving it side to side exclusively. So that's the mode that we use for a violin. That's almost always what the violinist would choose. But when you're playing pizzicato, when you're plucking, you have the option of flipping this little switch here and going into a mode where it's more like a guitar or a mandolin or a plucked instrument where the response is up and down. I mean, if you think about an acoustic guitar, it's got a flat top, and that top vibrates up and down. It doesn't do anything sideways.
Right.
So that's the nature of plucked instruments, how they developed acoustically over time, and we're able to replicate both modes in this instrument. The mode that's associated with plucking and the mode that's optimal for bowing, which is one of the great things about an electric instrument, is you can have different responses. I mean, with an acoustic instrument, I mean, you're going to sound different on your guitar than somebody else does.
Right.
But that guitar, acoustic guitar, is going to sound exactly the same if you give it the same input. Mm-hmm. It always has one way of responding. But with an electric instrument, you can set it up to respond in vastly different ways, and that's exciting. And that's what I like to bring to our instruments. I like to maximize what you can do with an electric instrument. Because after all, you'll lose a lot when you go to an electric instrument. I mean, you don't have that resonating chamber right there, and so if you're going to give something up, you want to get something back.
Right.
You know, and what I look for is just maximizing all the different opportunities that an electric instrument provides.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, what is this instrument made of? Is this actually made of wood?
This is made of maple.
Uh-huh. Is it a hollow design or is it a solid design?
Well, I call it a solid body design because it's made out of a single solid piece of wood, mm-hmm. But also because it is not designed to be a resonating chamber.
Okay.
It's designed to be a structural element to hold the strings, and the sound comes from the pickup. And of course, the sound originates in the strings. I mean, a pickup is just picking up the sound that's generated by the string. It doesn't create anything itself. But so instead of having a resonating top and so on, it has this pickup. And so you don't want to have that, and if you have, and of course there's a lot of acoustic electric instruments out there, and they have their place certainly, but for me, I like to try to separate the two so that the instrument itself is not creating one sound acoustically and then electronically creating a different sound. That's just potentially confusing, especially on a violin. If you have a violin and you have one sound coming out of the instrument here, which is strong, right under your ear, and a different sound coming out from the amplifier, then how do you know what sound your audience is hearing? It's much better to limit the acoustic response of the instrument and focus on the electric. That's how I look at it. Uh-huh. But in the case of the violin, weight is very important. So in fact, this is very heavily hollowed out to reduce the weight.
Okay.
But it's still structurally the same concept as a solid body instrument.
Right. Okay. Great.
It has the shoulder rest that's fully adjustable, and this little appendage here, of course, mimics the body of a violin. Mm-hmm. I resisted this heavily, but violin players insisted on it, so
right.
It's removable.
Okay.
So I always want maximum access. That's another thing about an electric instrument. You don't have to reach around the body. That's the beauty of it. So
they like to have it there so that they know where they're at in relation to the neck?
That's the reason. It's a reference.
Mm-hmm.
And, they all play with it, and it's necessary.
Right.
It is.
Right.
It's important for the player. So
it's beautiful with the maple top on it. Is absolutely gorgeous.
This is an NXT. Mm-hmm. It's a completely passive instrument. That is to say, the electronics don't require a battery, and it has a very natural kind of sound. And a lot of people really love the sound of this model. We also offer the CR series, which is a fully active instrument with more controls on board and so on. And so those are the two basic options that we offer in terms of the electronics.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So one of the iconic instruments that you designed was, of course, the Steinberger Bass. And you have a new bass here that you have there to your left. Tell us a little bit about how this relates to the original and how you've come forward with this one.
Okay, well, certainly it's the same basic concept. The benefits of the headless construction is balance, and this instrument, we don't have it on the strap here, but if you take a typical bass guitar with the tuners on the head there, it's neck heavy. If you have it on the strap and move around, it has what people refer to as neck dive.
Right.
So that's the essence of why I wanted to get back into making these instruments is I really believe in the value of that. And I wanted to repackage it, though, in a little less radical way than I had done originally. Now, when I made the Steinberger bass, I was, first of all, I had no real understanding of the marketplace, particularly. I was just, out there in La La Land doing this project that came to my imagination. It was a time of Star Wars and a whole kind of science, fiction, futuristic interest in popular culture.
Right.
And I remember there's a scene in, I think it's the first Star Wars. I'm not a big Star Wars fan or anything, but at the time I was checking it out. There's a bar scene sometime in the far future, and we talked about that, guitar designs are kind of timeless in a way. But to see this Fender, these Fender instruments used in this otherwise completely, space age,
Right.
and it's like, whoa! I mean, couldn't they do something that would be more interesting, as far as the instruments go? And what would people really be playing 100 years from now? And so that was what was in my mind. What would be the future, and in that kind of sci-fi concept. And so, which is great. But this instrument is about trying to provide those benefit, the essential benefit of the balance into a package that is more in the comfort zone for players, so that more players would be able to enjoy it.
Right.
There are a lot of refinements. It has this curved shape to the back that really conforms to the body. It's also tapered, so it's wider here than at the top, so that it leans in a little bit. These are all things, refinements that I've learned over time and wanted to incorporate in it. Another really huge feature of this instrument is the piezo pickup. The bowed electric instruments, really part of the growth in interest, although musicians might not think of it in these terms, but as someone involved in it more technically, I realized that without the piezo pickup, it wouldn't be happening. Piezo pickups are perfect for a violin because one is able to control the direction of the polarization and the sensitivity, so you can get a really great bowed sound. But there's also just the range of a piezo pickup it's a flat response from 2 cycles to 20,000 cycles, as opposed to a magnetic pickup, which is a big hump in the mid-range. So and of course I love magnetic pickup sound. It's not about being critical of a magnetic pickup sound, but about being excited about an alternative that has, very special attributes that musicians haven't had access to before. So this piezo really is a result of all the work I did to develop the piezo systems that we use on our bowed electrics, and the response of musicians to this piezo sound is very positive. Wicked deep low end and searing highs when you want them.
Right.
We have controls to limit that, when you don't want that, especially the treble. A lot of people find that a piezo is too bright for them. But of course, a lot of the reason for that is that piezos, it's not like you just have a piezo crystal and you stick it on your guitar and that's it. It's about the geometry of how it's integrated into the structure of the guitar. In this case, all the vibration goes through the piezo because it's underneath the bridge,
right,
underneath the saddle. So and getting that configuration with the right geometry is the key to getting that big low end sound. So it was a big part of this project for me was to be able to incorporate that into the bass guitar, so the bass guitarists could enjoy it. This tuner is also an important part of it. You know, the original Steinberger instruments require a double ball end string or an Allen wrench to tighten the clamping screws, whereas in this case, the string is self-clamping, is what I call it. And I don't know whether we have time to demonstrate how that works, or
We probably won't. We'll pull it apart, but can you just flip it over and show us how it kind of goes into the back there?
So the strings just go through, right through the tuner. First of all, you just loosen the tuner, pull out the old string. The ball end is at this end. You just drop the ball end in there through this little
Slot there in the
keyhole.
headstock, right?
Put it through this hole here and tighten it up. That's all there is to it. The tension of the string itself is what clamps it. That's the beauty of it. It's a patented system that I originally developed for the violin, but for the longest time, and the thing is, the reality of having a small business, you can't do everything you want to do all at once. So I've been wanting to make this guitar for many years, this bass guitar, because I knew this tuner was going to be perfect, just to be scaled up to handle the larger string. So it's certainly very exciting to have this available now.
All right, absolutely. I have one more question for you. Are we going to see a new Steinberger guitar?
Yes.
Yeah?
I've seen it.
You've seen it?
Which I'm very excited about. In fact, I had to develop some new variation on this tuner, which I'm very excited about, which works extremely well for the guitar. And yeah, it's a big part of our future.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited about that. That'll be great. That'll be great. Ned, thanks so much for coming in.
Hey,
appreciate you
thank
sharing
you.
your time with us and putting on the workshop tonight. Lots of great music. You got the guys are going to be playing and doing some stuff, so it's going to be fun.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you
being
very
here.
much for having me.
You should definitely check out these instruments. They really are special. They're amazing. The capabilities that are in there and the advances and all that you've done to push instrument
thank
design
you.
forward is very cool.
Appreciate it.
Great to have you here.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Nick. I'm Mitch Gallagher. Thanks for joining me for the Sweetwater Minute.